is One-on-One with Alex Kirsch, a podcast where I bring on one guest to talk about specific topics, whether they're political, social, economic, criminal, scientific, sports, or even entertainment. All questions have been given ahead to the guest beforehand. There are no tricks, and everything here is a good faith. Today's guest is running for the 9th Congressional District against the incumbent, Lisa McClain. His name is Clint St Mosley. A little background on him. Like me, he is not from Michigan. He is originally from North Carolina, but he met his future connection to Michigan through his wife, where they met in graduate school in Knoxville, Tennessee. And he and his family have been living here since 2016. So let's welcome today's guest, Clint St Mosley. How you doing today, Clint?
I'm doing great, Alex. How are you?
Glad it's Friday. I'm ready to get the weekend started, but I'm going to be very, very busy this weekend once again. So I kind of gave like the brief overview. Is there anything else you want to add to regarding your background and whatnot?
No, that's good. You know, I'm not originally, like you said, and you are not an original Michigander. So I grew up in North Carolina by way of Tennessee, met my wife, Susan, who is a Michigander. And when we found out we were having twin boys, moved up to Michigan about 8 years ago. So I absolutely love it. It reminds me a lot of North Carolina other than the winter.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of outdoors, a lot of lakes, active people, good education.
Yeah.
Blue pockets in a red rural area. So very similar to my home state of North Carolina.
Absolutely. And, you know, there are parts of Michigan that do kind of remind me of Oregon, but the only thing, like, because that's where I'm really from, but the only thing is that Oregon has mountains. I sometimes miss the mountains, like seeing them off the distance, but, you know, like, you know, I'm also, like, close to the coast, about an hour and a half from the coast, but I'm so close to Lake Huron, I can pretty much go, and it's pretty much just like the ocean. The only thing that's different is just no salt water, essentially. But Michigan is a beautiful state. I never thought I ever would have lived here, but I'm glad I did. I mean, where I live is an amazing place. You know, the county I live in is great. Where I work at is great. You know, it's a great place to live. Michigan is a great state.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's go ahead and just get right into it. So Clint, you already shared with the Tuscola County Democrats, but can you share with us the reason of like why you're running? Like, why did you decide to run?
Yeah, a couple things, Alex. You know, the first and the most important thing is I truly feel there's a better way. I believe there's a better way to do things that are being done now, especially as it relates to the 9th District. You know, my incumbent, Lisa McClain, we'll talk about her, but, you know, I am a constituent. I do get her Friday emails. I haven't gotten it yet today, but usually when I get it, you know, I try to look through it. And as I looked at what she was focusing on and what the 118th Congress are doing or not doing, we'll talk a little bit about their lack of productivity in a minute. But, you know, I just believe that for my kids who are just finished first grade, Spencer and Oliver, seven-year-old twins, I believe there's a better way. I believe we can better represent the 9th District. I believe we have bigger and better things that we can bring to the 9th District. And I want to make sure that voters in the 9th District have a choice between Lisa McClain and her track record, the Republican track record, the Trump track record, and what we can offer and what we can bring to Michiganders in the 9th District.
Absolutely. So what do you think kind of separates you from Lisa McClain?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, I'm an optimist. I always have been. I'm a glass half full kind of guy. I believe that the better and best days are ahead of us, despite the short-term issues and challenges we may have, and they are big. Mm-hmm. You know, I believe that if we work together, Alex, that there's nothing we can't accomplish. We've proven it. Americans' exceptionalism has been proven time and time again and over the past 250 years. And, you know, I believe that when we work together, that we can do things that improve people's quality of life. We can expand rights. We can do that while increasing national security and safety and do it in a fiscally responsible manner. So to your question, what separates me from what I've seen Lisa McClain over the past 4 years, she is a Trump MAGA follower. She votes almost 100% with them. She listens to them. And that is not what the 9th District needs. That is the poster child of extremism, right? When you think about partisanship and the social media shenanigans, you know, she will clip a little bit of her berating somebody in a congressional hearing, and that'll be her clip, right? It doesn't say what happened before, what happened after. And there's others that do that, but that's one of the things that separates us. I believe that if we work together, we can represent everyone, and I believe she is partisan. I believe she is extreme, and I believe that she just wants to follow the Trump agenda, and I don't believe that agenda is the best for America. I don't believe it's the best for Michigan, and it sure is not the best for the 9th District.
Fantastic. Yeah, I tend to agree. There's a lot of I have a lot of issues with Lisa McClain. I always give credit where it's due. Like on some legislation, I've agreed with her on, but there are some things where I feel she's very, hypocritical on. Like for example, my personal thing is like when they talked about like, trans women participating in sports. She went up there and said, "I am a woman, hear me roar." But yet she voted against the reinstitution of the Violence Against Women Act, which it's like she talks about she's out to protect women, but yet she goes completely against that notion. I was like, what? I mean, was that just a virtue signal? That's what I'd like to know.
Yeah, that's a great example, and I think a couple other good examples are how strongly she supports national security and things like that, and then to vote against the funding and support for Ukraine. I mean, this is one of the few issues that most people can get behind right now, and that is that Vladimir Putin is a dictator, is an aggressor, and he's not going to stop at Ukraine. And to talk about national security and talk about our veterans and our military, and then to vote against that act is troublesome to me. Other things that she's talked about as well. And I think most famously right now, it's the immigration. The emails that she sends out on Friday about Biden's border crisis and about the hysteria. And look, I agree. We have an issue. We have an immigration issue. We have a southern border issue, and it's something that we need to fix. But Alex, you and I both know the only branch of government that can fix this issue long term is a branch of government that she is a member of. It's the Congress. The Congress has not done anything substantial, important since Ronald Reagan, right? Since I was in elementary school. And if we're going to fix the border issue, then we have to do it humanely and we have to do it effectively. But it's got to be a long-term solution. It can't be short-term patchwork, and that's her body of government. It's literally like the bus driver saying, "Hey, we can't go anywhere because we don't have a driver." It's like, isn't that you? Isn't that your job? And that's her job to fix it, and she's not. She's voting against it.
And before we kind of move on from Lisa McClain, are there some things that you feel that she's done right since she's been in Congress? And are there some things that you really think she's kind of just screwed the pooch on or done wrong on?
Yeah, I mean, there are some things that we have common ground on. I personally believe in a balanced budget. We have to have an honest discussion. You probably do that with your family on Sunday afternoon or whenever you do it. You sit down and you set a budget and you have to stick to it, right? Michigan does a great job of that, and I believe at a federal level we need to do a balanced budget. Now, I know she's that that is part of her approach. Now we differ on many other things when it comes to fiscal responsibility and what that means.
Certainly.
But balanced budget, yeah. We've agreed. She just was part of the getting rid of some of these nonsense fees, right? We're inflation is already an issue enough, but every time we turn around, there's fees here, fees there, right? You book a hotel and then you got a resort fee and a checkout fee and a pillow fee, right? It's like some of these things that she's been in support of. Term limits, I think we both agree we need to figure out what that is. Michigan, just enhance its term limits to 12.
Yeah.
You can serve in Congress or Senate for a total of 12 years. I think something like that at a federal level would be good. And I think that, she hasn't come out and said this is what her plan would be. But, I like Michigan's approach to, hey, you have a cumulative, maybe you have so many years you can serve in one branch, one house, and then a cumulative number. Those are a couple things that I think we probably are closer to see eye to eye on than others.
Certainly. And what about things you think she's done wrong, though?
Oh, it's how long do we have tonight? You
can give me two. Two are like the ones that you really think just hit home. It's just like, wow, why would you do that?
Yeah, infrastructure. Ukraine, reproductive rights. Those would be three that are just top of the mind, right? Again, we have to fight the Eastern Front. We have to fight Russia. We have to defend Ukraine and stay true to NATO and our allies. On the infrastructure bill, she voted against it, right? And she's, I believe she's scheduled. Have to look at her current schedule and agenda, but she's currently scheduled to go out and take credit for infrastructure projects in which she voted against.
Love it.
No shame, you know. There are some that have no shame. You voted against something, but you're going to deliver the checks. I've got a problem with that, right? I think that's to the core of my integrity and ethics and how I was raised. I would have a trouble going somewhere and saying, hey, here's your big fat check and photo op without having to say, hey, look, I just want to let you know, Alex, I voted against this, but I am going to deliver the check to you. And then when we get to reproductive rights, I think I may have shared with you, but this is something that's very personal to me. Right now, we just had a vote in the past few weeks on contraception, access to contraception.
Yep.
We just had a vote on IVF. So, real quick, just to recap my story is my wife and I got married, started planning for a family pretty quickly and had some struggles. We went to see a fertility doctor and office and to get everything checked out. Is it this part? Is it what's going on? What's preventing us from getting pregnant and having a family? And you go through that process, and luckily for us, we didn't have to go to IVF, but we did have a miscarriage at 6 weeks. And part of that process and that journey is once you identify that the fetus, our baby didn't have a heartbeat, you say, okay, how do I, what's the best route in this situation? And the physicians, the science is they say, we're going to do a D&C procedure. You go in there, it's a surgical procedure where you clean everything up and make sure that the mother is as healthy as possible and that your chances for pregnancy are the best they can be. So we had that procedure. And then a little while later, we got pregnant with twins. And so that was through a process called IUI, not as invasive and intense as IVF, but it is still a process that is being, discussed right now. And so in states, I know you're from the West Coast, our friends in Idaho right now, if you're having complications or you need a D&C, they are literally medevacing patients from Idaho to other states because the physicians and the hospitals do not know if they are compliant, right? Fair enough. They don't know if these are legal procedures. They don't know what is legal or not. So you have mothers and families who just need some basic medical care. This is not controversial stuff when you're in medical school, but these states are having issues right now. So, that's something that's very personal and that I always speak to. And I 100% disagree with the approach Lisa McClain and the Republicans are taking.
Absolutely. And, the amazing thing is like, we could talk about like, abortion, healthcare and whatnot for hours on end, but it's just the thing that most people don't recognize though, is that if they were to do if some states were to ban abortion outright, the people that would be affected the most are the people that are in the middle and the lower class, because they can't afford to, if they get pregnant, by horrendous means, or there's a fetus that is basically not going to develop properly, or it's pretty much going to die, within the womb, they're not going to be able to get that kind of care, essentially. And the thing is, the people that will be able to do this, you'll have a person that might be conservative, but let's say they get themselves a mistress and gets her pregnant, doesn't want his wife to find out. He'll be able to afford to get her to go to a state where she can get that, procedure taken care of, essentially, which that's something that people need to take into consideration. It's not just, people that are, but we're talking specifically, it's a class issue as well. But, that's a very lengthy issue to talk about. So.
Well, and Alex, just to your point, man, I mean, they're in Texas, they're debating whether to criminalize crossing state borders. So even the person the conservative with the mistress, now that may be illegal, right? And so it's aiding and abetting if you help your mistress to get across state lines.
Yep.
So they're going to not only, the extremes they are going to, and if you just stop and say why, right? What is the reason? What is the end game? The only two things that I can come to, and I'm always willing to stand to be corrected. It is control, right? Controlling women, and it is religious beliefs. I am all for your religious beliefs. I respect them. But in our Constitution, we have separation of church and state, and it's very important that you can have your beliefs, but when you go putting your beliefs on others, especially in the government and at that level, I have an issue with that. And again, that is why I'm here to give the 9th District and Michiganders a choice on reproductive rights and a lot of other rights.
Yep. Thankfully, Michigan has kept those rights essentially, which is phenomenal. Go Big Grit. Very proud of our governor. So
and Alex, just let me sorry, just to add one thing, because that you are 100% true. Michigan has codified that in our Constitution. But if Washington, D.C. and Republicans and some on the Supreme Court have their way, there's going to be a national ban or a national law that supersedes Michigan's law. So although I just don't want, voters out there rested on their laurels, because these rights that we have enshrined in our Constitution can be taken away. And we're not far off. If you listen to what Republicans say, if you listen to what justices say, it's on their radar, right? And I'd never trust anything Donald Trump says. So even though he says he won't sign it, I'm not holding my breath on anything that man says.
Me neither. Never. Not by a long shot.
So
The only time I believe.
Vote.
Yeah, the only time I believe him is when he says, "I want to be a dictator only for one day." I believe him there, but I know that's not. I believe he wants to be a dictator, but not for one day.
Right?
I have found that when people have that kind of power, they will never give that up. So
you just don't give it up, do you?
Yeah.
No.
So I'm pretty sure you've seen the Congress in chaos lately. Now there are many people who are loyal to Donald Trump and only are voting just to appease him. They're not doing it because it's right for the country. They're not doing it because it's going to benefit the country in the long run. It's because, like, the border bill is a great example. He says, no, this is a bad bill, and they voted against it. But now there are also a lot of personal attacks happening in Congress lately. Now, do you wonder if you should get elected that you might have to get into that mudslinging, or are you going to try to avoid that as much as possible?
I was raised differently. I was raised by a hardworking father and mother who taught me a lot about respect. So, I do think there's the mudslinging, and I think there's a couple reasons for it, in my opinion. For-profit media, right? For-profit news. It's clickbait, right? They lead with that. It gets people to watch for even a few minutes. We used to have a news, media. Think Walter Cronkite. Think when you and I were growing up. I'm a little bit older than you, I think. So, you would have these newscasters who led with the news. They tried not to be partial. They tried to just put it out there, and it was always a loss leader, right? So news organizations at NBC and CBS and ABC back in the day, the news department lost money, but they knew they felt like, hey, these airwaves are public. They are the people's airwaves, and we're going to give the news. And in that, CNN, Fox, that kind of turned into this, right? I'm preaching in the choir. I'm telling you things you already know, but for-profit media has changed what leads, right, and what gets on the news. And so these things, they're entertaining. They're reality TV. They're something that I probably used to watch on MTV or something.
Oh yeah,
when I was a kid, right? And but yeah. So now, so you definitely have for-profit news, gerrymandering. Marjorie Taylor Greene's district. She's probably more scared about getting voted out by someone crazier than her than a Democrat, right, or a moderate.
Mhm.
That so they're fighting to appease their base, and when you have this gerrymandering in this, especially in these states that have no oversight, that's part of it, and then social media, right? Especially during the
Clicks.
16 and 20, yeah, they're getting clicks. What can you get to grab people's attention because we have so much stimulus around us? I mean, it's kind of hard to even count the number of times where something's trying to grab our attention today, whether it's our phone or um, a billboard, or everything is kind of serving us up a message. So yeah, to your point, I mean, there's a lot of people that are engaging in that, and then part is a defense too, right? Like when you have the Marjorie Taylor Greene, like AOC stepped in, and now it becomes a like, hey, you know, I'm going to stand up for people, or I think Eric Swalwell too. I think he's doing a good job in Congress of trying to respectfully push back and be an
Yep.
advocate, and push the line on, hey, look, this is probably not something our grandparents would have done as Congress people, but what we're facing is not something our grandparents faced, right? It was historically known that Alex, you and I could debate about policy, and then we have a bourbon,
Mhm.
Um,
Absolutely.
I just don't know that that's happening now with Marjorie Taylor Greene and AOC and
Mhm.
Jasmine Crockett. So
So, speaking of which, is there any member of Congress that you are most impressed by? I know you brought up Eric Swalwell, but is there like anyone that you just like, wow, that person is freaking amazing? Like, huge fan of that person. Like, is there anybody that just like pops out at you like, wow,
yeah.
I would love to work with this person like on a committee or something like that.
Yeah, a couple that stand out. I mean, down in Ohio, we got Marcy Kaptur. Man, a lot of people don't know her,
Mhm.
but she's been a stalwart in the Congress. Female, just a female badass. She's down there. She's been, I think, since early '80s, late '70s. She's been a Congressperson. I love Jamie Raskin's story. His journey, what he's done, the heartbreak of having a child
Yeah.
lost to suicide. Um, Adam Schiff, I respect him. Jim Clyburn in South Carolina has been amazing. Ro Khanna,
Mhm.
and Alyssa Slotkin. I mean, she's right here in our backyard.
Yep.
Um, I've enjoyed watching her and being represented by her before our districts changed. And so I think there's a lot of great leaders out there and people that I looked up to and would love to learn from, and if I'm given the opportunity.
Yep. If I would have had to pick one, it's got to be Jasmine Crockett. She does not back down from anybody. Like, she is not scared of anybody. And the thing is like, she's right. Like, she does you can tell she does her homework. But
Yeah.
like, I think people are just intimidated by her because she doesn't back down. And like, they might be used to somebody. It's just like, I remember watching the mudslinging between her and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and you could just tell that she got the last laugh in that one. That was hilarious. But
That was good, man.
it was
Yeah.
really good.
Point of clarification is
Sure.
be blunt, right? That's what she said is hey, let me just get a point of clarification, because I thought what she said was inappropriate, but is beach blonde, butch built.
Yeah.
Yeah. My wife was down in Detroit at a festival, and she saw somebody's shirt. This was like right after it happened. Just shows how quick shirts get printed and
Oh, yeah.
how things go to print. I had a shirt that said beach blonde, butch built, whatever
Yep.
the saying was. On a little
Yep.
t-shirt.
Yeah, that was definitely something else. So, should you get elected to Congress, are there any positions or committees that you would like to be a part of, and why?
Yeah, so as a freshman congressperson, I don't know that they'll give me much choice, but what I would say two things. One, wherever my expertise could apply and help.
Mhm.
So housing, insurance, small business, I'm very passionate about, right?
Yeah.
I love to be able to, I'm someone who in my whole life, I always love to help people.
Mhm.
And if it's something that I can provide instant expertise in, I'm very familiar with what's going on in insurance here in Michigan and nationally. Very familiar with small businesses and hiring people and leading people and things like that. And then secondly, I would say what the ninth district needs, and eventually a couple of topics that are important to me and that I could serve would be agriculture. infrastructure.
Oh yeah.
And always in education and healthcare. That's always, whether it's rural or urban. Those are two areas that I'm very passionate about: healthcare and education. So if I could pick and choose and wave the magic wand, it would be somewhere in that area, something that I provide life experience and expertise,
Sure.
and things that are very crucial to the ninth district.
Yep. And we're definitely going to talk about something like that too. So, but since you brought up the ninth district, let's talk about the ninth district. Now, you've lived here for almost a decade. Now, since you've lived here, what are some of the three biggest issues that you think the ninth district faces? And it could be healthcare, infrastructure. What is it? What are the three biggest issues you think that they face right now?
Yeah, so as I travel around and having lived here almost a decade, I would say at the top of the list is healthcare and wellness.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you know, that would be one. Number two is women and families issues. We've talked about reproductive rights, but just expanding that.
Mm-hmm.
Paid family medical leave is vitally important to so many people, especially in the ninth district. So, healthcare and wellness, women and family issues. And then third, I think, that we don't, that we hear about, but we don't talk about enough, is income inequality.
Mm-hmm.
That hits closer to home than sometimes we think.
Mm-hmm.
When we have so much wealth in such few hands in America and in the world, you see it in rural America. You see it in even the suburbs where I live in Lake Orion, Oxford. The impacts are becoming more and more clear. So, healthcare, we have to have, we have to expand our coverage. And, I'm for Medicare for all. I personally, Alex, work with so many people who are on Medicare and Social Security. And I'm telling you, man, it is a popular program. It's simple to understand. Once you get enrolled, you pretty much have it for life. It's simple to administer and utilize. It's a great partnership because if we were able to do Medicare for all, which I'm a huge advocate for, you have a single payer, the federal government, but you have capitalism. You have local providers, local doctor's office, whether a small business, medium business, large medical group. So you have, the accesses there. You can layer in capitalism. You can layer in, so, the way Medicare works for those of us who are not on it or seniors, you have your basic level, your hospital care and your doctor care. But then you have companies that come in and say, hey, look, let me make this better for you. Whether it's Medicare Supplement or Medicare Advantage, there are ways to enhance that program. And I think that we still would have that, right? The way we have it now is most people get it through their work, which is a weird way. Not many other countries do it that way. And it's one of the biggest burdens to businesses. You talk to small businesses or even Fortune 500 companies, they don't like administering healthcare. It's costly. It's highly regulated. There's a lot of compliance.
Mm-hmm.
Costs are rising. They don't have a lot of say. So whether, almost everyone doesn't like holding that football. Again, whether it's the company or the union or whomever. So if we could have a high quality basic level like Social Security and Medicare provide currently, we could also enhance that. And we could focus on everyone has a basic level, and then we go in and enhance it. So, I could talk for hours on that, but I work with so many people who they have Medicare now, and it's it's a lifesaver and a game changer for them. So, healthcare, wellness, income inequality, women and family issues. That is what I see. That is the thing that it could be huge momentum, life-changing opportunities for us to bring, common sense to Washington, D.C., and then bring that back to Washington and Romeo and to Schola County. These things would be huge quality of life enhancers for everyone, really.
Certainly, because like, and it's interesting because I talked, I don't know if you saw the video, but I talked to April Austin Tosca, who's running for the 98th district, and she talked about like how there's not a lot of good quality hospitals like in some parts of the 98th district. So if people want to go to a good hospital, they gotta outsource to like a those ambulances. I mean, yeah, granted, they're trained EMTs and whatnot, but there's no guarantee that, they're going to get there in time or whatnot. So then they got to do medevac and whatnot. So like the quality of hospitals especially in rural parts of Michigan, especially in Tuscola County or whatever counties you might be, like in the rural parts, there might be some that are good, but they're not as good a quality as like, say, for example, in Port Huron or like in Lansing or something like that, but there are even some that in more urban areas where the healthcare is not as good quality either.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And these are things that, we've been battling, but, you have to have good infrastructure.
Yes.
You have to have hospitals. You have to have, EMTs and such. And you have to have satellites, right? Because again, we're never going to be able to have a level 1 trauma center in every town, right? It's just not physically. No. The United States is too large. But what we can do is as we expand care and access, you're able to triage and then quickly get people to the next level of care. But you go back to what we were talking about earlier with reproductive rights and abortion. You have medical students right now who are picking where they're going to live and practice based on some of these laws, right? And so in Louisiana, you've got medical students who grew up in Louisiana. They went to LSU or Tulane or whatever medical school. Now they're about to graduate and they're like, I'm not practicing here. Like I got this crazy law, 6-week law. I don't know what I got medical debt. I got to provide for my family. I'm going to get sued or imprisoned because, I'm practicing the medicine that I was trained to do. So the reason that reminded me of that is just what you're talking about with rural care. We need to make it easier for high quality physicians and OBGYNs and emergency medical doctors to come to rural America. We don't need to make it harder, and there's several things we need to do. But you're right. We gotta bring more access. We got to make it easier. We got to increase, utilization and people in coverage for people, and we've got to make it easier for doctors and physicians and medical companies to be able to provide care.
So there was another question I'm going to ask you, but I'm going to have to just jump right into the big question that I have for you because it ties into it and it's so essential. So since you're being in insurance, okay, I sent you a video a while back regarding PBMs. Now, for those not aware what that means, a PBM is a pharmacy benefit manager. Now, they are the middlemen that negotiate prices for prescription drugs between drug manufacturers and the insurance companies. And there are 3 PBMs that control 80% of the market. That's Caremark, also known as CVS, Express Rights, Cigna, and Optum Rx, which is United Health Group. Now, as of right now, like I said, they control 80% of prescriptions across the country. This puts independent pharmacies in the country at a huge disadvantage. Now, when you're dealing with especially when you're dealing with multi-billion-dollar corporations. Now, many who have the market cornered are regarding getting prescription drugs to people, especially in rural communities. Corporations like CVS, however, make such a massive profit. They know that they can charge whatever price, depending on the region, essentially. Now, smaller independent pharmacies find themselves struggling to compete with the big players. Now, the White House earlier this year held a conference on PBMs, and an independent pharmacist from Kansas said, if we don't do PBM reform in this country, we're going to lose 34% of the pharmacies in the country this year. That's this year alone. Now, that's about 14,000 pharmacies. I did the math. Now, to some, that may not seem like much, but that would be devastating to the average person who may live in the middle of a rural area. Now, where healthcare is not going to necessarily be as a higher quality. Now, why this is important is like, say, for example, you've got Jim Bob. He's got a pharmacy, and he has to charge a certain amount because he has to keep that clinic open, essentially. So he has to charge, like, say, in some parts, like in urban parts, this medication might be like $60, but he's going to have to charge $120 because he lives out in the middle of nowhere and he has to get it out there. You got to worry about the trucking company that's going to bring it out there. You got to worry about like the supplier that's going to bring it out to you and whatnot. All of that kind of ties together. And then it's going to not just affect him, it's going to affect the people that live in that community essentially, because now they got to fork over a little bit more money essentially, which means they got to budget it out. Oh my God, this means I can't buy as many groceries, or I can't put as much gas in my car because I got to pay these medical bills. Now, what are your thoughts about PBMs? And if you had an opportunity to drop legislation for this, what kind of ideas would you kind of bring to the table to make it so PBMs don't keep swallowing up the little guy, or is that just inevitable?
Well, at the height of it, we have an antitrust issue. We have, and this isn't the only industry, but when you have three companies, and although they may say they're different names and have different letterhead, they're doing similar things and may even be working together to have the same model, right? And ensure the same model. So, I think number one, we have to look at antitrust through nationally and make sure that we're breaking up illegal companies and illegal ways of doing business. That it's not good for the American consumer. It's not good for the patients. So that's the first thing. I was talking to some local pharmacists and pharmacy owners here in the 9th District. And, if you just talk to them and understand and hear their business, you think they're lying. You think they're crazy. What I mean by that is they pay $100 for that prescription you're talking about. But the PBM says they can only collect $60. Okay, so they're losing money. So they're in business, like you said, they have to get the inventory, they have to pay rent, they have to pay employees, and they're losing money because that's the contract they have. They don't have another option. But there are many prescriptions they lose money on. And when I first heard that, I was like, come on, right? But that is the case right now. So the short answer to your question is we have an antitrust issue, we have a healthcare issue. But I think the best path forward is looking at the cost plus model when we're talking about reimbursement. So Mark Cuban has started a company on this called Cost Plus Pharmacy. And what it says is, here's our transparent prices. This is what it costs to make it. He's up against a headwind right now because, he doesn't have the patents and he can't have access to distribute a lot of these medications because the companies don't want to lose that PBM model. They don't want to lose that. They own the manufacturer, they own the pharmacy, they own the healthcare company. They own the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want anything disrupting that. So Mark Cuban is trying to disrupt that, but for him to do that, he's starting with generic prescriptions. He's got to literally manufacture the pharmaceutical so that he can sell it at the price that he wants to sell it at. So that's one way, but that's also a way. There's some legislation and some ideas about that. Hey, look, if you're a local pharmacy and you're buying this prescription from the manufacturer, that the price that you're reimbursed for or allowed to charge has to be your cost plus 15% or 18% or whatever that is. But the fact that small pharmacies that are out in Maysville, Mayville, Marysville, all these local pharmacies, they're having to, just to play in the game, just to stay in business, they're having to take losses on a lot of prescriptions, and that's not sustainable. It's not fair to them. They're providing, a lot of care. They're not just filling prescriptions. They're talking to people. They're building relationships. And this is, if you look at the science and statistics about healthcare, having someone that you trust, for Alex to have someone that he can trust and go to locally to talk about not only prescriptions, but some simple care issues, it's vitally important to overall health, right? We don't need those type of questions and people going into the emergency room and bottleneck in the emergency room where they need to be focused on more intensive and acute care, right? So, got to break up and regulate better. A lot of these laws are already on the books. We just need to enforce them. Whether it's the Federal Trade Commission, the Department of Justice, a lot of departments, we just need to enforce the rules that are on the books. We need to take a look at antitrust, whether it's in social media or tech or healthcare, and enforce the rules that are there. We got to look at healthcare more holistically. We've got to have an honest conversation in this country about, is healthcare a right, or is healthcare a luxury item? I believe it's a right. Mm-hmm. I believe we have to look at it like that and start doing things that other, industrialized, civilized countries are doing. But to your question is we've got to help these local pharmacies because they're a critical part of overall care in our national model.
100%. And, it's just, when I first heard about it, I heard about it because I follow Mark Cuban on X platform, right? And I saw he gave a quick interview. And I was like, let me watch this video because I was kind of curious about it because I didn't know anything about PBMs. When I watched it, it's like, why aren't more people aware of this? And I think it's just because, people aren't aware about it because they're not worried about it right now because it doesn't affect them directly. But there are people that it does affect, that they are worried about this. And this is I think this is why it's such a crucial issue. And, with you being in insurance, I'm pretty sure you've had your fair share of thoughts about PBMs. And you just said you've talked to independent pharmacies. Because if Jim Bob's, if I say Jim Bob once again, if his pharmacy closes down, CVS or one of those other top three, pharmacies, hey, Jim Bob's just closed down. Let's put another pharmacy there, and they'll be able to charge whatever because you know what they've got a nice little cushion to fall back on. They can buy that property. They can charge pretty much whatever they want to. I mean, they'll charge good rates, but the thing is though, it's going to swallow up the business because I remember there was a gentleman from Mayville was talking about how a grocery store closed down in his town. So now people have to outsource. They have to go out of town to go get groceries and stuff like that. It's things like that that just eat up the small towns, the rural communities, because it's such a huge hit on their economy. It's a huge hit on their community. That's why, why aren't more people talking about this issue, essentially?
No, it's a great point. I'm glad you brought it up because, again, they strategically don't want you to know what a PBM is, right? Because most of our healthcare is distributed either through the federal government or through employers. The employers are the ones that are handling this, and they think, I genuinely think that companies, they think they're helping, control costs, and they think they're trying to give something convenient to their employees. And they're trying to save money, right? Because they have this burden that we talked about earlier that they don't want. So I don't think it's totally nefarious or bad spirited. I just think that it's pharmaceutical companies, and they have the vertical integration where they own the manufacturing, they own the healthcare company, they own the PBM, they own the pharmacy itself with CVS and such. It's just, we've got to take a look at that and holistically, look at what we want to do in the future.
Certainly. And, what's amazing is the fact that I remember Katie Porter, she's great also. She brings props too, which I really love because she just lays it out for the common person to understand. And I remember she was talking about how Medicare for All would actually save this country billions of dollars over the next 10 years. And she's asking all these people that work in insurance or these people that is there a Medicare for All stadium? Is there a Medicare for All, baseball park? And they're like, no. And, she just brought how much do they spend on advertising? It's $14. Medicare for All doesn't have that. They don't spend that much. It's not administrative costs. That's what it is. No, it was $17. I think it was. Big farm these insurance companies, they spend about $17 for advertising. Medicare for All spends $1 or $2 essentially, and that goes into administrative costs, which is insanity. I know it's not really the same as PBMs, but I think it's all tied together because they've got the money, they've got the market, they've got all this in here, and it's just there's so much that we don't know about these things. And I'm not trying to say pharmacies are evil. I'm just saying that some pharmacies, the big ones, they're trying to push out products, but their main object is to make money as far as I'm concerned. It's just like that's why like you've got some people like slaughterhouses. There are some slaughterhouses, they want to be the entire corner market for the meat industry. Why? Because it brings more, they want to make more money that way. I get it. I understand that. Some people would say that's malicious, it's nefarious, but in a capitalist system, what's your objective? To make money. That's because you've got shareholders. Excuse me. You've got employees to pay. There's so much to kind of tie into, but I feel like I would be talking forever on that. But it's just, there's so much that I wish people knew more about this.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it's again, the old saying is, be careful, how the sausage is made, right? You talked about slaughterhouses and that as well. That's another area where, we have these few companies controlling 70, 80% of whether it's poultry or pork or beef. We've got to take a look at that and say, is that what we want, right? Do we want to have our food supply in the hands of a few large companies, or do we want some diversity, in that mix? So that's another question that's vitally important to the 9th District with the agriculture and such up, especially in the Northern Thumb.
Absolutely. I see like some people, friends of mine have joined. Wick TV just joined up. Hey, Wick, how's it going? Thanks for tuning in, buddy. So let's go into the next question. On the 21st of May, Democrats, along with Jamie Raskin, introduced legislation that would prevent U.S. officials from accepting money, payments, or gifts from foreign governments without congressional consent. Now, this isn't just an issue with presidents, however. Lobbying is a very heavy concern with the average voters who keep their ears to the ground. Now, for starters, let me ask you, what are your thoughts on lobbyists? Are they a necessary evil, or are they part of a broken system of bribery that erodes the trust in the public, or do you have another way of putting it, essentially?
Wow, it's a great question, Alex. I think, we have to look at who is the lobbyist representing and what are their goals, right? So lobbyists are kind of, they're put into one large bucket. So again, you have lobbyists that are advocating for reproductive rights. Mm-hmm. You have lobbyists that are advocating for Medicare for all. You have lobbyists who are trying to. You have a lot of lobbyists. They're advocating for Amazon, right? I believe 3 lobbyists for every member of Congress is the. I heard some numbers that Amazon has so many registered lobbyists. It's more than Congress or something. But
yeah.
So we have to look at. I don't believe all lobbyists are bad. Mm-hmm. I believe they're advocates, or maybe that's what we need is we need to differentiate between advocates and lobbyists, right? Advocates are working for people. Advocates are not focused on profit. Advocates are change agents, and lobbyists and some others are working on a profit motive, or maybe there's a distinction between what their intent is, right? There's a lot of money in politics, and I think that's another issue we have to talk about is how do we get more qualified, younger folks to run that are not self-funded millionaires and billionaires, and it's tough, right? There's a lot of money in politics, and lobbyists are a part of that, and companies, especially with Citizens United, which I'm 100% against. I believe was a failure by the Supreme Court. But you got a lot of money in politics. So to your question about the lobbyists, there are many lobbyists that are doing a good job in trying to advocate for people and for causes. But, if you're receiving large sums of money from an organization, how do you not have, just as a human, just as a person, how do you not have, not saying it's bribery, but how do you not have thoughts that you owe them something, mm-hmm. right? It's indirectly, it's not a direct bribe where I say, Alex, I'm going to give you $10,000 to vote this way on this piece of legislation, which is illegal. Mm-hmm. But just the relationship and that it's something that's very concerning holistically about how much money is in politics. I mean, Again, it's your money. If you earned it, you can spend it. That's one way to think of it. Luckily, the gentleman who just spent $62 million in Maryland lost his Senate primary.
Yeah.
And, it's nothing bad against him. He's a Democratic congressperson. He's built a large business, Total Wine and Spirits. But it's almost like a reality check and a breather to say, hey, look, man, at least you can't, you can't always buy an election, right? $62 million definitely helps.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that he lost that election is almost a little comforting to the average person like myself, who's, I'm not independently wealthy. I'm a small business owner. I'm a father of two. I live a good life, and I'm very blessed. But there's a lot of money in politics, from lobbyists to such, and I think they can serve a good. They can't help advocate. And then one last thing I'll just say, Alex, is there's a lot of people who talk about lobbyists writing legislation. I'm not against that, just in the sense that, look, efficiency and effectiveness are keys to getting more legislation passed and having more time for more things that affect people, right? Now, again, if Amazon writes a piece of legislation that is 100% for Amazon and only benefits Amazon, then that, again, should be debated and it should not pass, right? Mm-hmm. But if an organization that is advocating for reproductive rights or Medicare for all or something that is good for people, they say, hey, look, Clint, here is a body of work that we would like to see, and then we take it, edit it, add our version 2.0. It's debated in the committee. You know what I mean? There's a process for that. So some people get, I think, overworked up about, hey, that organization is writing legislation. That's not the problem. The problem is that it's just being blindly passed, right? If it's not being debated, it's not being reviewed. That's the problem.
Yeah.
But the sheer fact of like, hey, here's a starting point. Let's no, I don't like that. That's not going to work. That doesn't, that's not helping someone in Caseville. You know what I mean? That's got to get out of here.
Yeah.
Things like that, then we can do it. But lobbyists, campaign finance, and then how we introduce legislation and debate and enact legislation is important.
So let's create a little hypothetical scenario just to make things interesting. How about it? Okay. So a bill is going to get pushed forward that would essentially ban all fundraising from lobbyists and special interest groups. For example, your opponent would no longer be able to get fundraising for a campaign for places like Valor PAC or Michigan Sugar. However, at the same time, you wouldn't be able to get any PAC money or any funding. Now, and nor would any other elected official. Now, would that level the playing field a little bit more, or would it actually make campaigns harder to fund? Therefore, more difficult for you to get your message out. Now, some of these politicians coming into office are very wealthy, so they can just, fund their own campaigns. Not everyone can. Do you think that would kind of like inhibit it or make things more difficult, or would it kind of level things out?
Well, the first part of your question is, does it level the playing field? Yes, it would, because, if you look at, I'm walking in to two things against Lisa McClain. Number one, in her first campaign, she self-funded $1.5 million, I believe, of her own money. So she just woke up, Alex. I mean, think about this. You're so wealthy, or you have so much free money that's not going towards groceries and housing and paying the bills, that you just wake up and you lean over to your spouse and say, hey, let's run for Congress and let's put $1.5 million of our own money in it, right? And again, that's totally legal with the current state of affairs and rules. That's totally legal. So you put $1.5 million. Mm-hmm. So what percentage of the 9th district do you think can just do that, right? Very small. Mm-hmm. So that's one part. The second part is when you are an incumbent, hundreds of thousands of dollars are given to you by the PACs, right? The Valor PAC, the Sugar PAC, and again, that's legal. So I'm not saying they're doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
But to your question, does it level the playing field? Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of ideas that are being thrown out there about public funding of campaigns, and small donations. If you, for example, if I raised $100 from a constituent, that the federal government would match it, right? So you're trying to encourage grassroots small donations versus high dollars, PACs, corporations, influence in elections. So yeah, there's some good thoughts there.
Yeah,
it's very difficult to get out, and start up your campaign and get the message out there. I think some would say it's easier today because you have email and social media and some things that they didn't have years ago, where really all you had was canvassing, door knocking, mailers, and TV, which is very expensive. Now you have different things that do help you get the message out, but also, like we talked about earlier, there's so much messages being put in front of us that it's hard to stay focused.
Absolutely, 100%. Before we go into the next question, I mean, that was all good stuff, but I just got to make sure I get some recognition up there. Folks, if you're watching this, please be sure to like, share, make a few comments and whatnot, get this algorithm up, because we got to get Clint as much exposure as humanly possible on the internet, especially. So if you know somebody that wants to learn more about Clint St Mosley, you got to bring them onto this channel. Hit like, share, subscribe, comment, do whatever you got to do, because I want to get this guy as much exposure, because we're having a great conversation here. What about you, Clint? You having a good time so far?
I very much so am. I appreciate
Fantastic.
it, Alex. And again, thanks for again thinking about the like and share, because my twin boys, they're always watching the YouTube videos, and they're always asking. So you got to get that in there and get, like you said, the algorithm, and get the message out there.
100%, 100%. Hey, Progressive Victory, if you're out there, get this message out there. Come on, show me some love here. Show Clinton some love here. All right. So the next one, infrastructure. That's one of my main topics. I love infrastructure. I love talking about it. I could talk about it all day, because without it, the whole country falls apart, essentially, right? So,
literally, yeah.
Yep, the bipartisan infrastructure bill made a push for more public transportation across the country. The 9th District, however, doesn't have it necessarily as a high priority. Now, as of right now, 80% of commuters drive alone, 9.58% work at home, 7.59% carpool. Now, should there be more of a push for public transport in this district, especially due to the cost of gas this day and age, or the price to purchase of a car?
Yes. The simple answer is yes. I think you have to look at it differently. As we look at the 9th District, I would look at it in thirds. I would look at it in the southern third, which is a majority of your population, right? And I think that is already starting to have, as we expand some public transportations in Southeast Michigan, in Oakland County, and some areas have voted on millages that are going to increase funding. But for that part, it's the chicken and the egg, right? You have to pay for some of the infrastructure. You have to pass these millages, and you can't start public transportation, busing, things like that on day one. So that's the bus aspect, right? So if you build it, they will come, right? Field of dreams. You've got to say, hey, look, here's the vision, here's the plan, and I think that's what helps people. I've seen that in local communities here. Hey, Alex, we're going to pass this millage. You're going to pay more taxes, or the community is going to pay more taxes, and you're going to get these 3 bus routes in 3 years. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's tangible. And then so that's number one. Number two, as you look at the middle part of the district, it gets harder, right? There's just so much land and so little density. And then on the northern third, you have the same issue, but I think the differentiation there is the population on the coast, right? We've got a beautiful coast on the northern tip of the thumb, from Caseville, Port Austin, all the way down to Lexington and Port Huron.
Yeah.
So you have more of a demand, and so you can address that differently. But public transportation, we are so far behind.
Yep.
I know you've spent some time overseas, and talking to you, I've spent some time in Europe, and wow, right?
Yeah.
I mean, where you can get to point A, point to point B in such little time and for so little cost. It's amazing.
Yes.
Right. And so that's kind of a couple thoughts there. To your point about commuters, I mean, I'm very impressed with Michigan's commuter lots. They're always underutilized. They're never full. But I drive by them all the time, and I love the infrastructure.
Yes.
I think we have to create incentives and ways for people to utilize those. We're such a convenience nation, and a convenience, that's so important to us, right? Like to drive somewhere, if I know I'm going to work, to drive somewhere, park, coordinate with another person or people and drive, that's difficult. I think technology is helping that. I know that there's some apps that are being used in Southeast Michigan where you can carpool, where you can, instantly short-term rent a car. So those are helping. But, I think post-COVID, it's kind of been, some of those things have been torn up with, now people are working from home. Now they're going back to the office. But we are so far behind. We need a large scale works. And, Michigan's looking at that right now as a state, but we need it from the federal, state, and local level, more mass transit, more light rail, more buses, more a little bit of everything, would be my thoughts. But big problem.
And the reason why I brought that up is because also, like, to add a little bit more into it, in the 9th district, the average worker commute is 30 plus minutes. Like, I have to drive like about 40 minutes to work, 40 minutes there, 40 minutes back, which I'm okay with. I'm used to. I'm do it all the time. But that's more than the average American worker. Now, 2.87 of the workforce have commutes of 90 plus minutes. Now, you mentioned buses, but do you think there are some other ways we can help kind of lighten the load on the American worker, do you think?
As far as it relates to
transportation or like
transportation. So, yeah, I mean, so going back to infrastructure, I think Atlanta was very. So Atlanta is known for just horrible traffic.
Yes,
right.
I know. I used to live in Georgia.
There you go. So, yeah, what part were you in?
I lived in the Columbus area, so like it was like I bordered Alabama because I was stationed down there at Fort Benning, so I was like right on the border. So it's like the southwestern portion of it. Southwest,
yeah. So I mean, Atlanta was notorious. So they had a large scale works program where they looked at everything, right? And I think that's what we have to do is look, how many days a week are people going into the work? What time are they, right? How do we incentivize and work with large companies to say, hey, look, can we do some different shifts that may not only help traffic and congestion, but actually maybe help work-life balance? Because these families now are spending 2 hours each way into work. Is there a better way for traffic, and that could also benefit families and things like that?
Sure.
I think we have to look at that. From an infrastructure standpoint, we have to look at connectivity, right? COVID was a game changer when it proved to companies that we can be as productive, if not more productive, with a remote workforce, with a hybrid workforce. So, we've got to look at that. I spent 2 years at a startup company called Mom Source Network. We did a lot of, the reason it was called Mom Source is we worked with a lot of moms who were wanted a balance, right? They wanted to care for their families, but they also wanted to contribute professionally.
Sure.
And we would partner them with progressive companies that were open to that. But we also did a lot of consulting with businesses about how to be more flexible and how to attract more talent with just common sense approaches. So, yeah, I mean, how we lighten the load on the American worker, I think there's a lot of pieces that go into that, from remote work, but we have to have infrastructure and connectivity.
Yep.
To working with companies to provide incentives. I think it's also, how do you get more? This is always $1 million question, but how do you get more industry into rural America, right? How do we battery plants, advanced technology, advanced manufacturing? How do we get these to areas to where it's a win-win, right? It's a win for the community and it's a win for the company, because maybe they have, higher retention on the workforce, or they have access to incentives that help both community and help them achieve what they want to in a business standpoint. So I think there's a lot we need to do, but unfortunately I don't have a magic answer or a magic wand on how to do that, right? You've got overpopulation in some areas, you got congestion in some areas, and you've got hitting 3 deer on your way to work in northern Michigan. So you got a lot of different issues.
Yeah, definitely. Like I hit a deer earlier this year, and that's the first time I ever hit a deer, and I was like, God bless. Yeah. Ugh, Sand Lake Road. So
well, they're out in the middle of the day too. It's like
absolutely.
So.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And like I said, I could talk infrastructure all day long, but we've only got so much time. So we earlier we talked about Congress, right? The 2023 Congress was deemed the most ineffective Congress in almost a century. Many members of the Congress are voting against legislation that could in fact help the American people, but are voting against it because Donald Trump says they should. Now, it's presidential election year. Regardless of who gets elected into office of president this November, whether it be Joe Biden or Donald Trump, if you are elected to Congress, would you state, okay, if legislation comes across that benefits the American people, would you be willing to support regardless of who is president? Like, say, for example, let's say, hypothetically, God forbid, Donald Trump goes back in office, right? And legislation gets passed, or he wants this bit of legislation, but it actually might be good for the American people. Like, would you still support it regardless of who's president?
Yes. Yeah. 100%. That I'm elected to represent the 9th district, 700 plus thousand people. And I'm not just going to go there and have my agenda or the Democratic agenda. We need more compromise.
Yes.
We're there to do a job for the American people. I would go to as many Democratic meetings as I would Republican Party meetings. I think you have to be, you've got to put yourself out there and realize that once the election's over, I'm a representative of 700 plus thousand people. And legislation comes across my desk that is good for the people. It makes progress, and it's a give and take, right? Congress and legislating is a compromise in the sense that different people have different priorities and different goals, but unless you have a super majority, which is I can't think back to a time we've had that. Unless you have a super majority, you have to compromise, and you have to be willing to look at pieces of legislation and say, are they good for America? Are they good for the 9th district? And if they are, then you've got to give them an honest look, and you got to give them the attention they deserve. But I mean, to your point, the 118th Congress, which 23 and 24, they're on a record-breaking pace, and not a good record-breaking pace.
Yeah.
They've passed, I believe at last number, 60, 70 pieces of legislation. That's from January of 23 to now.
Yep.
We're a year and a half into that term, where just, for people to know, and they probably already know this, but most Congresses will pass between 400 and 600 pieces of meaningful legislation. And these aren't, there's some that are thrown in there to rename the post office, the Alex Kirsch Memorial, post office and whatever. But, meaningful legislation is usually around 400 to 600.
Yep.
Some years it dips to 300. But I mean, they're going to be hard pressed with an election coming up to even pass 100.
Yeah.
Unless stuff gets passed in the lame duck session between November and December. But they're on record-breaking pace, and that's not a good thing.
It's not good at all. And like the American people see this, and this is why people have such low faith in Congress, because we see the infighting, we see the legislation. Like this Congress right now seems more concerned about how do we get Joe Biden, how do we get Hunter Biden. And, I get it. People like turnabout is fair play. Okay, fine, if that's the game you want to play. But it's just, you're there to represent the American people. You're there to represent your constituents. That's what's most important. And, I bring it up all the time. When Joe Biden first took office, in his first year, they got the infrastructure bill passed, the first most extensive bipartisan infrastructure bill since Eisenhower, for crying out loud. Then he's got the CARES Act, the PACT Act. You've got, the American Rescue Plan, which is also done under Donald Trump. Democrats cross the line, says this is what's good for the American people. And it's just, when you look at legislation like this, it's so important for people to understand that it's not just about like what's popular, it's about what's right. And like, I think that's what some people need to focus on. These issues are what can make or break a country. And that's why I'm such a huge supporter of like why the Democratic Congress 2021, 2022 did such a great job. Those 2 years, they got great legislation passed, and I loved every second of it.
And yeah, I think you look at Michigan, Alex. You look at Michigan again. We had a divided House and executive branch, and the Michigan voters flipped the House, flipped the Senate, kept the governor's office, and we have the trifecta. Mm-hmm. And all three branches are Democratic, and you've seen the meaningful legislation that has been passed.
Yes.
And so it just shows how important and how close we are. If we can hold the White House, which I believe we will, mm-hmm. I know Joe Biden isn't energizing and exciting a lot of people, but look at his body of work, right? And at this point, it's a decision between Biden and Trump. So if we can hold the White House, if we can hold the Senate, even if there's a 50-50 tie, and we can flip the House, there, to your words, there are meaningful legislation that can be passed that can dramatically impact and improve people's lives. Yeah. You start thinking about Medicare for all. You start thinking about paid and family medical leave. You start thinking, so that a mother who just had a baby does not have to return to her job after 6 weeks or 12 weeks, right? You give her and the father and the family the time and care they need. You start talking about universal pre-K. So now you get that first year with your family, with your newborn. And now at year one, they go into school. They go into public education. So instead of being 5 or 6 years old, now at the first year, they have care and it's paid for. So now you can work if you choose to.
Yep.
You can contribute. You can help grow our economies, local economies, state economies, and national. And there's some just dynamic, amazing things that the majority of people want. The majority of people see in other countries, and they're like, "Why don't we have that? We're America. We're the best, damn it!"
Absolutely.
Why don't we have some of these things that others have that we should have?
Because childcare, I talk to people that take their children to childcare, and it's horrible. Like some of them are like, oh, like especially if you want to make sure that your child goes to a good, child care center, and that's really, really important. You want to make sure that they're in a good environment where they can learn to grow, they can interact with other children. But you also want to make sure that, they're learning something, or they're just, the people that are working there are also competent. There's so much that plays into it that's so crucial. And like you said, meaningful legislation. I thought one of the biggest winners there was like free school lunches. Do people have an understanding of like how much that takes the burden off of like the average family? I mean, some families that it's hard for them to afford it because you've got mom over here, a single mom. She's working 2 or 3 different jobs. That's just barely going to pay for the car that she just recently bought, the car payments, the gas, the school supplies. All of it kind of just ties. It really does lift the burden. And people are like, well, who's going to pay for it? Well, guess what? Congratulations, you're a taxpayer. I'm all for that, honestly. This is just common sense stuff, honestly. But you also want to make sure that the school lunches, of course, are quality too. They're not just like overly processed food, but that's, wish in one hand, crap in another, see which one fills up faster when it comes to stuff like that. I mean, I believe in that. So
No, it's good points. I mean, Michelle Obama did so much to put a light and focus on our food, our meals, our nutrition. Um, bringing awareness is so important. How we educate people, because there's again there's a lot of bad choices out there, right? With our food economy and processed foods, overly processed foods. So it's important. But yeah, small things like that was a game changer. Because think about it, like you're great at telling stories, Alex. Think about the kids that I still remember, kids who were on free lunch. It was embarrassing to them. It was known. They get up there and they're having to this kid, 7, 8-year-old, 9-year-old kid, right? He's having to say I'm free lunch, or it's a stigma, and it's not a stigma that's helping helping what we already are dealing with in our schools with mental health. There's just no benefit to that, right? And it's not the kid's fault.
Nope.
They can't go out there and get a job, right? They're 7 years old, and making sure they have hot breakfast, hot lunch. It's again, nothing's wrong with that. Other countries do it, and again, it's common sense. But yeah, a lot of those things can really dramatically help families. And again, when my two kids were in daycare, our monthly daycare bill, my wife and I both work still. Our monthly daycare bill was larger than our mortgage.
Yeah.
Let that sink in. So it's not just about go out there and get a job. Like, if your job's not paying more than the daycare, like why do that? Why be away from your kid? Be away from your family? So a lot of things that we can fix with good legislation if we can get it passed.
Certainly. So kind of like focusing like on the like federal issues, like before we get ready to close up shop though. There's a lot of federal issues right now, and like we've gone into great detail. We've talked about abortion rights and stuff like that. But when it comes to federal, issues, that the ones that everyone's mostly focused about, inflation, abortion rights, the border, national debt, which one do you think has like the harshest impact on the 9th district as of right now, and why? Just one. Like out of all of those, which one do you think hurts the most?
I would say inflation is hurting right now, but when you think about the whole, and that's because we're fortunate to have reproductive rights in our Constitution, enshrined in our Constitution right now.
Certainly.
If I look at the 9th district, I would say it has to do with inflation and wages, right? Inflation, yes, hit a historic or high. Especially with what we've experienced over the past 10 to 15 years. It's been worse in the 70s and 80s. Inflation hit harder, but no one remembers that, right? The things we remember right now are 2% mortgages and low car loans and credit card offers and such. So inflation is hitting people's pocketbook, right? When they go to the fill up, or they go to Kroger, or wherever they do their grocery shopping. That is important, but it would not have been as big of an issue had wages kept up with productivity over the past 40 years. So we can't have an inflation conversation without having a wage conversation, and this historic 40-year crusade against wages and a living wage. Whether it's the minimum wage, whether it's trying to break up unions and people's access to unions, that's something that we've got to battle quickly, effectively, and have meaningful impact. Whether it's the minimum wage, whether it's increasing access and membership in unions, a lot of those things are going to help raise wages, so that inflation isn't as big of a hit when we do have those cyclical or one-off moments of inflation.
Absolutely. And that's a very fair point. I mean, to say, oh, inflation is not a big deal right now would be untrue. I mean, we're doing better than most of the other first world nations, but people are still hurting because interest rates are still somewhat high. But, when President Biden and the Federal Reserve chairman and Treasury Secretary all came together, they boosted interest rates so we did not default and go into recession, which thankfully we didn't go into recession. And I tell people, like, yeah, it kind of sucks right now, but I would say our country has been through much worse. It's just and I hate saying it like that because it's easy for me to say because I've got a guaranteed paycheck for the rest of my life from my service in the military and whatnot. But the thing is, though, is that like not everybody is in the same situation as me, and I have to be realistic about that. People are struggling right now, but it's not something you can just wave a magic wand at and expect it to go away. It doesn't work like that. It's just things like this do take time. They take, especially after coming out of a global pandemic, which we're still not fully recovered from. But it's just, I get it. I understand it. I understand to the American people. Yeah, it sucks right now. And, people are struggling. But, it could be a lot worse, too. I mean, we could be back at like 10% inflation. We could be back at like, higher interest rates and whatnot. I mean, but, we're still better than most other countries, but, we still got a long ways to go. Let's just be pragmatic about it.
Yeah, that's a great point, Alex. I mean, one of the things you just said is who are we comparing ourselves to, right? It doesn't matter if you're playing a sport or a board game with your family, you keep score. And if we're comparing inflation to the past 15 years in America, yeah, it's high. It's spiked higher than it's been in 15, 20 years. But if you look at the G7, which is the 7 most industrialized countries, right? We have the lowest unemployment, lower uninflation, and higher productivity than those other countries. So what that means, right? And I know it doesn't change John's grocery bill, but when you look at these things, we have better lower inflation, higher productivity, higher gains. All the statistics that we track than other countries, right? Like England and France and other countries that are in these numbers. So you can't you got to have that conversation if we're being honest to say, look, yes, it's bad, but we're doing better than any other similar sized productive economy, right?
Certainly.
And credit goes to Biden and Chairman Powell. A lot of people, a lot of adults in the room, a lot of smart people who have taken some brutal criticism, especially Chairman Powell. But I think history will serve that. Looks like they're doing the right thing. Everyone, again, go back a year, Alex, and find me an expert or a pundit or a talking head that wasn't guaranteeing a recession. Everyone was talking about a recession.
Yep.
And the NASDAQ and the Dow and the S&P are up double digits this year.
Yep.
So
100%. So I got a couple more questions before we close out. What are some things that you want to tell those who may vote Republican? For example, if you want them to vote for you, what is your message to them? Why should they vote for you and not Lisa McClain?
The first thing I tell them, Alex, is that, I'm not asking you to leave your party. I know that politics is personal. I know that politics sometimes is a long journey. Your parents, your grandparents, your partisan history may go back a long time. So number one, I'm not asking you to leave your party. I'm asking you to vote for the best candidate in this race. Give me a chance to prove I can be effective and that I can represent the whole 9th district, right? All 700 plus thousand people. Lisa McClain has proven she's not a representative of the district. She voted against aid to Ukraine. She voted against infrastructure. Look at her record. She is part of the least productive Congress since we've been keeping track. We talked about that. I believe it goes back to World War II that we've been keeping these statistics on legislation passed. She talks about border security, and she does nothing. So I'm not asking you to leave your party. I'm just asking you to vote for the best candidate, and let me show you that we can represent and bring meaningful legislation to the 9th District.
100%. So my last question is this. What do you think is the best future for this country? Not just the state of Michigan, but the whole country. Like the best possible outcome for this country. What are some great things that you see going ahead?
Look, I'm an optimist. I believe, like I told you when we started this conversation, that I believe the best days are ahead of us long term. So short term, we have to face, the issue at hand, which is Donald Trump and his disregard for democracy. I believe he's a dangerous person. I believe we should take him at his word and at his face value. And, I think he's going to do substantial harm to this country if he's elected. Things we haven't seen. He's already done things that we haven't seen in the history of America. I think he's going to do worse things. But after that, what is the best future for this country? Famous quote, I believe it was Franklin that said it, was, what do you have? You have a democracy if you can keep it. So the best thing about us is continuing to be that beacon of light and being a democracy for others to see. We have so much promise when it comes to renewable energy, technology, artificial intelligence. We are the leader in those areas, and we'll be making substantial contributions here, in the United States. But again, the thing at hand is making sure that we aren't the boy who cried wolf, but we are making sure that we do everything we can when it comes to voting rights, protecting democracy at the local and national level, right? So many great people in the clerk's office, the Secretary of State, that are protecting democracy. And we have to make sure we support those people, protect democracy, keep it in its truest form, which is people have the right to vote. They should have the right to do that effectively and efficiently. Democracy is the best future for this country.
100%. One of my favorite quotes of all time is by Orson Swett Martin. He's a philosopher, I think it was. But the quality of your work in the long run will be the deciding factor on how much your services are valued by the world. That's one of my favorite quotes of all time, because every good deed you do leaves a positive impact, and people remember stuff like that. So if you can leave a positive impact, people remember things like that. And at the same time, if you do something bad, people remember that stuff. And it's like it can have a negative impact. So it's best for us to be optimistic, and just like have this positive outlook. Because we want to be the change we want to see in the world. We want to make that difference where we can make things, make this world a better place. It's just, and it's so critical and so important. And I'm totally on board with that.
The other saying that just came to mind when you said that is plant a tree, although you'll never sit under its shade, right? We've got, and democracy is like that. We've got to do the things today that make sure we still have a democracy in the future. And even if we're never going to see the benefits or enjoy the fruits of the labor, we've got to make sure that we do. And, I know we did spend a lot of time talking about the environment, but that's another area that, again, we've got to take the science seriously and do common sense measures to protect for our children, grandchildren, and those who will come after us.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And that's a great way to end this interview right here. So, Clint, thank you so much for taking the time to talk. I mean, you and I have talked like twice already, but, face to face. But I'm so glad you actually had the chance to come and talk on my platform. It's been an absolute privilege.
Well, the honor is mine. It's great talking to you. Enjoy this Friday night. And again, I'll see you around the 9th District here soon. Absolutely. So before you go, let everybody know where they can find you and let everybody know how they can support you and your campaign. Yeah, so www.clint, CLINT, the number 4congress.com. So Clint4congress.com. That has some of our contact info. We're also on Facebook, Clint, the number 4 Congress. We're pushing some of our events and such there, but we're getting out in the community. And again, we talked about money and politics. So we have an Act Blue account that you can help, whether it's $1 or whatever you can give. It just goes to show the organizations that we're building momentum with dollars and donors. So those are some metrics that are being tracked. So everything that people donate goes right back into the 9th district. We use local union printers and try to put all of our vendors and resources back into the community. So that's kind of where we're on. Follow along. Love to see everyone out. Whether it's Tuscola, Huron County, St. Clair County, Oakland, and Macomb. We've got a large district, but we're getting out there and putting some miles on the car. We're living like some of those people that have the 90-minute commute. I understand that. So we're right there with you.
Get after it, my buddy. Get after it. Yep. Hey, I will be leaving links to your to the Facebook page and to your website in the description below. I just got to update that right quick. So, but once again, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Everybody that decided to join in on the stream, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you all enjoyed yourself. Once again, Clint, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great weekend and good luck on the rest of your campaign. I'll see you on the flip side.
Thanks, sir.
Take care now.
Bye.